Hey guys, what's going on? John Mass here with Coastal Crypto Mining, and we're back with a review video. It's been a long time coming since we've done one of these, but some new ASIC miners have hit the streets, and we've got some in hand, and we're going to do a quick review on them. So stick around for the whole video. We're going to be first going over the web interface and the GUI, and then we'll be tearing the machine apart, pulling the guts out of it, seeing what makes it tick. So let's go ahead and dive into it. All right, guys, so if you caught our live stream, I'm sure you're well aware of the fact that we got our hands on a Bluestar L1 miner. It's gone by a few different names, Black Miner L1, Hammer Miner L1, but all in all, it's the same machine. It does look a little bit different than some of the pictures I'm sure you guys have seen around, or the one you're actually seeing on the screen. It's gone through a couple small modifications, but nothing too crazy. The biggest change is the shell on top that secures and protects the control boards. This machine is being called the L7 clone. It's not. I'll tell you right now, right off the bat, if that's what you're here for, it's not an L7 clone at this point in time. This machine itself is more in the realm of a LT5 Pro by Goldshell or an LT6 maybe. As you can see on the screen, it's doing right around 4.9 gigahash at 3750. I've been playing with the settings a little bit. We can make this thing a little bit more efficient. But what's really interesting is the preset low power mode, which is 2 gigahash at 850 watts. That's more in the realm of, say, Goldshell X5, which is a couple years old. I mean, that miner is a tank. If you want to check out that review, I'll make sure that I link it in the description down below for you. Or you can go over to Son of a Text channel and check out his review on one of our machines as well. But let's go ahead, let's dive into the GUI and see what really makes this thing tick from a software point of view. All right, so here's the GUI. It looks fairly clean, nothing crazy or overwhelming. It's pretty straightforward, simple login like any other ASIC machine, root password, admin, that kind of typical stuff. We've seen better GUIs, we've seen worse ones, IB Link being one of the worst ones I've seen personally. But you know, there's a lot of information here. There's a lot of interesting tabs that they've implemented into this web GUI. So let's go ahead and go through them. Let's start over here. Obviously, we're in the miner status window here. We also have miner configuration with miner pool, network, password, and upgrade. And then we have system overview, monitor, kernel log, diagnostic, and reboot. Let's start at the bottom and check out the help tab. Now, they give some interesting information here. Obviously, you know, reset your password and all that stuff. You know, system administration, input password, root, and all that kind of stuff. They give the official website for the miner, hashaltcoin.com/en/. I haven't been able to get this website to load consistently. I've been able to pull it up once, and I click on one tab, and the whole thing goes blank. So maybe you guys have better luck than I do. Let me know in the comments down below for sure. But there is the official support email, and I can also reach them on Telegram. So that was nice of them to throw in. Underneath Systems tab, obviously we all know what reboot does. It's going to restart your entire machine. Diagnostics gives you some options here to ping the machine and do some trace routes. These are commands that you typically find from doing like an SSH login and implementing a command line or command code to force these things to happen. They've already set it up for you, so you don't have to do that. You can do it right here. Next on the list is the kernel log. Now, the kernel log for me, I don't know if this is a typical thing for Bluestars, but all the other ASICs that I've seen, the kernel log continues to report as the machine runs. This one seems to only report for the first couple seconds or the couple minutes that the machine is booting up. So you see a lot of error messages: power on, voltage, 125, load, FPGA failed, power, and so on, fan 4, too slow. And so as the machine is booting up, it's throwing these error messages that are nothing to really consider or look at, to be honest with you. Once the machine is booted up, and it's warm and it's running properly, you don't see any more error message being reported. These are only during startup. But the reason why I think we're not seeing a consistent kernel log is because of this new monitoring tab that we're seeing. Now, this monitoring tab is something that I would say Hive OS or systems like Foreman. That's one of the monitoring systems that we use at the castle to monitor our entire farm. That's how they would, API into these machines, and be able to pull data off of them to report to these monitoring services. So that's kind of what this page does, is it kind of gives a readout. Now this continues to update on a regular basis. So I'm thinking that maybe they've separated the kernel log out between the monitor and the initial boot up for any issues, and then the monitoring system would be reporting to a third party system for like Hive or Foreman. There are other ones out there. Those are the only two that I'm really closely familiar with. Again, Foreman's a great service that we use at the farm. Then let's click on Overview. Now, Overview just kind of gives you the basic information. Bluestar L1 gives you the kernel version. File system was last updated in September of 2021. Haven't been able to find any updated firmware as of this video going live. So let me know in the description down below if you watch this at a later date and you found an updated firmware or a third-party firmware. I'm really interested to see what you guys find. So that's about it for systems. Now let's take a look at configuration, because this is where things really get interesting. Now, pool miner and pool setup is kind of typical. We see this in a lot of different ASIC miners. You put your stratum in, your URL, your worker address, and your basic password, that kind of thing. And then towards the bottom here, we have our setup tab. Now, right now it's 36 degrees in the farm, ambient temperature. So I'm not too worried about it overheating. So I do have the 80 degrees Celsius unchecked. I probably, in all honesty, could turn down the fan speed to probably like 70 and I'd be completely fine. But now we have, after those two basic settings, we have the low power mode. This is the preset we talked about at the beginning of the video. This will automatically, if I click it and hit save, will automatically set the machine to the 2 gigahash at 850 watts setting. And it also does change the custom voltage as you do that, so you can see it. So I've already gone ahead. As you can see, the custom voltage does have a nice big old check next to it. So I have been playing with this machine a little bit. I've been slowly ramping up the voltage. So right now we're just about at that 3785 roughly volts. So what they're doing is custom voltage. It's 1,275 volts per board. We can figure that out and convert it to wattage to figure out what our power supply is capable of putting out, so we don't burn out our power supply or melt any components. So I've been slowly, bringing up the voltage on each board along with the frequency. I haven't touched the EMA. I was under the impression that we don't want to touch that by some of the groups and telegrams that I've reached out and talked to. Let's leave the EMA alone at this point in time. I really haven't played with it, but I have been messing with the custom frequency and custom voltage. Stock, it's set at 1250, and your frequency is set at 815. So I've gone up quite a bit and eliminated some of the fault errors that I've seen on some of the chips. But let's go back to that GUI. It should have been updated by now. We can kind of see what the hash rate is. So consistently, this thing's been running for just about a day now, and we're seeing an average hash rate about 5 gigahash, and our wattage is about 3750 right now. So we're actually increasing the efficiency of the machine with some of these finer tuned custom voltages and frequencies. Typical readout, it's got 3 boards. It has roughly 324 7-nanometer chips in the machine. They're densely packed. These machines are pretty cool looking. You'll see when we crack it open what the hashboard actually looks like. It's not individual heat sinks for the ASIC chips like we saw in the earlier miner machines. So it's an actual heat block, which is nice to see, which leads me to believe that maybe a hydro kit is in the works down the line. or some serious overclocking is available. So yeah, I like the fact that it's got that already kind of pre-built into the software. We've already reached out to the Hive team that we have contact with. We're also going to try to reach out to MSK, who builds the software, builds the firmware for Hive, and some of our other firmware developers that we know of, and see if anything is in the work, because this machine is ripe for the picking when it comes to third-party firmware. It can really do some damage to the market, to the Bitmain market, if this machine has some third-party firmware for overclocking. The L7 doesn't have third-party firmware right now. I'm sure it's coming soon, but getting third-party firmware for this machine would be huge. It has a lot of potential when it comes to overclocking, in my opinion. But that's enough of me rambling about the GUI and how fancy it is and all this, all the numbers. You guys have been sticking around, and I'm sure you're ready for the teardown. You want to see what makes this machine tick. So let's go ahead. Let's jump over to the farm and see what's inside behind the case of these machines, and you can see what ours looks like in comparison to some of the pictures that are out there floating around the internet right now. I do want to try something though. I see a lot of YouTubers do this, and since my castle is a couple minutes away, and I'm sure you guys don't want to be sitting in the car with me, watching the scenery go by. So I'm going to try a little transition here. That. No, I know what it is. All right, I think we made it. We're here at the Coastal Crypto Castle, and here it is, a long-awaited teardown of the Bluestar L1 machine. Pretty little machine, looks a little different than what we've seen in pictures. One of the first things that I noticed that stand out is they brought the bezel for the control board straight to the front and removed that slit that was here in the front for the control board and easy access. So it's a little bit more secure. For argument's sake and for speed of the video, I'm going to be using power tools to tear this thing down because I lack any decent editing skills. So bear with me. I don't recommend using power tools if you're not comfortable with them. These screws are machine thread and are very easily stripped. So be careful. Simple screwdriver will get the job done. But like I said, I'm going to use a power tool to kind of speed up the process. We're first going to remove the top, then the PSU on the side, along with the fans. I believe there's a bus bar inside that we will have to unscrew, and then we will be able to pull out the hash points. So let's go ahead and dive on into it. A couple screws here on the back. Couple screws on the front. It looks like that's the top cover. Real quick and easy and simple. I'm going to also remove the cover for the power supply while we're here. Everything should just come right off fairly simply. There it is. There's our beautiful control board. It's funny how similar this control board looks to something from Bitmain or Antminer, with the BeagleBone black breakout board on top. The fans have been tilted 90 degrees for easier access and no interference. And then we're also using a bus bar system. It also looks like we're using Bitmain ribbon cables as well. The screw is a little tricky here in the back. The wires are blocking it slightly, so we're going to make sure we don't pitch any of those wires. Putting a little bit of pressure on it just to pop that case off. And that's all it is. The case for the PSU just slots into place. All right, so looks like the control board just slid into place here, is held in with a couple screws going through the top cover. Again, we have similar ribbon cables that we've seen on an Antminer. Be careful with the cover off and powering this machine up, because these bus bars will be live as soon as you plug power into this PSU. There is no manual on and off switch for this power supply. So let's go ahead and disconnect our control board. We're going to disconnect both the power, and then this is a control ribbon cable that controls the power supply, because these are smart power supplies for these machines. I'm going to disconnect the ribbon cables from the control boards just to kind of get them out of our way. All right, and I'm just connecting the power just to make sure that we don't have any shorts, because we did just unplug this machine. We don't want to fry our control board, so that's just unplugged for safety. We're going to leave the control board on the machine. Now you can see a lot of the components right from where it is. There is an SD slot or a TF card reader, so I'm hoping to see some third-party firmware being able to be flashed on these control boards down the line. Let's go ahead and unscrew our bus bars from our control boards while we're here. You'll notice I'm not using a magnetic tip. Again, we're trying to avoid any static discharge or jumping of electricity from the capacitors that are still retaining some power inside the power supply. There's our bus bars, front and back. Now the power supplies are disconnected. You can see the PSUs are loose inside. We're going to actually leave the front fans on, because to remove the control boards and the hash boards, we only need to remove the back fans. We're going to leave the longer screws attached to the shroud and just pull off the whole tin cover. Alright, now that we've removed the screws, now it's simple as just wiggle a little bit and the cover pops right off. Be careful, make sure that you disconnect your fan cables so you don't rip them out of the control board. And just like we had predicted earlier in the video, the very densely packed hash boards have solid heat sinks on one side, similar to the L7, similar to the S19s. It's a nice solid heat sink, but we do still see some of the older style individual heat sinks on the back side. So, I mean, this thing is heavy. It's got some good weight to it. We can see how densely packed these ASIC chips are on this control board. It's got some weight to it, guys. I wish you could understand how heavy this thing actually is. Remember, there's 324 ASIC chips between the three boards in this machine. I'm looking for any distinguishing marks on the control board itself to see if it stands out, like maybe it says Bitmain or L7 or Goldshell LT5, something that would indicate that they're using a similar design from another manufacturer. But nothing really stands out on the control boards themselves. There is a serial number. I'm sure the serial number matches what's on the case. And then we have individual PCB numbers as well. So let's go ahead and pull the rest of these out. Very careful with them. I'm putting them with the heavier heat sinks, the solid ones, down first, just to be careful we don't knock off any of these individual heat sinks. Now, they're not using thermal paste that you'd see on like a CPU or a GPU. This is a joint compound. This is a two-part epoxy thermal compound for these heat sinks that are individually attached to the ASIC chips. But still, we want to be careful when we move things around. Now that we have a little bit of a clear picture of the power supply, let me spin this around so you guys can see. I had called this out as a one-to-one replica of the APW12. Now, if you look here at the model number, it says GPW12. So very similar to the setup on the L7s and the S19s. There is only one screw holding on this power supply, so we can go ahead and pop that off. And the power supply, once everything is connected, should just slide right up and off. Be careful you don't bend your tabs that are on the back side. And that's your entire power supply, guys. There's not a lot to it. They've definitely made these things more compact than what they used to be. We're going to move that off to the side so you can kind of see everything laid out here for you. And there it is. There is the Bluestar L1 laid out in all its glory. Got our control board, again, that mimics the control board from the Bitmain series. We have another Bitmain style power supply, and our control boards, again, mimic Bitmain as well. So maybe that's why people are calling these a clone of the L7. Doesn't have the same power capacity as the L7 in terms of hash rate, but with some overclocking, with some third-party firmware, this thing could be a real contender in the cryptocurrency algorithm mining space. Real quick before we cut it off, I do just want to point out for everybody's safety the specs on the power supply. It's not rated for 120. It's 200 volts input, 277 as well. So you'll need a designated 240 power supply for these machines. Like I said, we have this thing plugged into two separate 15 amp breakers to make sure that we are safe and we can do some overclocking along the way. If you have any questions about what you see, comment down below. If you would like to get your hands on one yourself, we have a promo code going on right now for the holidays. Make sure you check out our site, coastalcryptomining.com. And as always, guys, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and hit that notification bell for when we go live every month. Take it easy.